This is episode 8. And actually, we're going to do a shorter episode rather than me sitting here and explaining 1,001 things to you and trying to make sense of it. I figured I'll talk about some lost films. Because, if you go back to the earlier episode, the idea of film culture kind of being disassembled, kind of existing, it's really strange. I live in the gate of the Midwest, so trying to find people that have watched a lot of different films is quite strange, actually. Back in the day, it was easy, and that's how it always seemed to me. However, I will tell you, films will bring people together. If somebody has working knowledge about films, they kind of create glue because they're the greatest art ever. I mean, they came up pretty much from the canon, like I said earlier, from the arts. Photography, motion pictures, the idea of moving pictures, like animation, film, comes from single drawings. It comes from a different conduit than television and radio and whatnot. So there's just these three films. I'm probably going to talk about more films as time goes on. Actually, for the love of God, I'm going to have a whole other podcast doing films called Cinematic Ride. That will be coming down the pipeline probably maybe March, roughly. That's what I'm thinking about right now. It's going to be running alternate from this. This is just a savage mess. There's thoughts, there's cue cards, there's ideas that I have, but for the most part, this is a lot more uncouth than your average everyday. Now, what's strange is, I typically will present my experience and my speculation, my point of view. That's what I do, right? Like every other Fiorito. What I like to do, though, is kind of template ideas. Like, the weird drop-off for me was it seemed to be after 99. 99 was a really good year of film. There's a lot of interesting films that came out in 1999. But it seemed like 2000 kind of set a different pace. And maybe it was the idea of we're not going to watch those films anymore. And that's so, I don't know. I don't know what happened. It seemed to be a larger control factor over parsing out information. Sometimes it got worse as the decade went on too, because I think 2015, I know I mentioned this before, 2015, 2013, it's almost like two separate markets. The idea of once they removed the video stores, it seemed to kind of all fall apart to a certain degree. The first film actually on this list is Wonder Boys. It's came out in 2000, and it's based on a Michael Chabon novel. Hopefully I'm saying these people's names right. That would be nice if I did. And it's interesting because the budget for this was $55 million, and the general box office return was about 33, 34, right? And it's weird because the cast is loaded. It's based on an interesting book, native Pittsburgh writer, so they even cut out a piece of the book that in itself could be kind of a separate story, but it was done so well that you don't necessarily miss it. In the book, it takes a kind of weird detour with this subject matter, and it's the wife. It's weird because I don't like summaries. I don't like presenting, going through the film and, let me break it down for you. I'm just not that person. I like the nuts and bolts of the situation. And I can kind of give you a general idea what it's about. I mean, I guess you guys have gotten so used to, general audiences have gotten so used to people just, this little, I have a working theory of, no, that's not how I operate when it comes to stuff. How do I get into this? Curtis Hanson directed it. And he had ties to LA Confidential. He did 8 Mile, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And Stephen Kloves helped adapt it. And Fabulous Baker Boys. And as far as I know, he did a lot of work with Harry Potter, adapting those novels over, including the Fantastic Beasts. That's what I got, the general information I gathered from them. And so this movie stars Michael Douglas and Frances McDermott, right? And Tobey Maguire and Robert Downey Jr. And who else? Rip Torn. Rip Torn's in the movie. It's just an interesting collection of people, right? Katie Holmes is in the movie. And it's essentially about a young writer meeting an old writer who's kind of trapped writing the same novel, to the point is where when you realize this is mirroring the novelist's life, and it's kind of injected into this story, it's really interesting. They cut everything down really tight to kind of give you the whole city, skirting the city feel to the movie. You don't get the full downtown whole structure, but you get the feel of the little neighborhoods, and that's kind of interesting. It gives you a whole background. So this novelist who's a teacher wrote this one book that's phenomenal. And he's in crisis. He doesn't realize, hasn't fully accepted the fact he's in crisis because wife left him. Things are kind of getting weird. The novel keeps gaining pages and gaining pages and gaining pages. It's the way it is. His partaking of various different drugs and alcohol beverages is a thing. So what happens is he meets this younger writer and realizes he's good, and the young writer starts seeking him out for advice, and that's Tobey Maguire. And that creates a whole interesting situation because he's more of like a romantic in regards to tone. He has a dark gothic presentation. I mean, one of the best lines of the movie is what is it with you Catholics? That's a great line. It's a great opening. One of the earlier lines. That movie had me hysterical. I have just a weird, unusual film that I thought would be universal. I thought this would be a big deal. And I remember somebody mentioning to me, a few years back, they don't run that in heavy rotation. You see all these, no, I'm not going to bash superheroes or Star Wars. That's a thing, right? That kind of earned its space in our culture. So fuck you for bashing that stuff. Even though they don't necessarily fire right, it needs to exist, right? The market should be big enough to have all these... somebody should be able to watch Wonder Boys and watch Star Wars. It should be interchangeable. You would think the one thing that's interesting is film. And people that are interested in film should partake in that. And there was a large amount of people. There was a whole push of indie films in the 90s. And I thought it was easy to cross over. And to a certain degree, it kind of did. But there seemed to be constant separation in the market. Again, this thing happened. This is my experience with this. And actually, I'm giving you numbers. $55 million. You have a star-studded cast based on a really good novel. Reasonably decent adaptation. I'm granted some of the jokes misfire, the tighter in the book, but it's still there. The still feel is there, right? The actions are communicated relatively well. Despite the fact they cut out the whole wife experience and sum it up into basically Tobey Maguire's character invading their liquor cabinet while watching random stuff and getting high. That's a thing that happens in the film. They summarize that piece. Because honestly, the detour with the wife would have probably taken a lot longer. And most of that detail would have been unnecessary. It would weigh down the film. Now, again, I think honestly you could have probably done something with it. Because it does take a bit to go through the process. With that said, the budget $55 million, it didn't necessarily hit it out of the park. However, I'm going to get back to it. Bottom line, films make money. Art that is constantly revisited makes money. Right? The only thing that bothered me is this is not in heavy rotation. And with that idea, people don't seem to have seen this film a lot after the fact. When I mentioned the name of the film, I know it's anecdotal when I'm saying it, they seem to not be aware that it existed. Or they caught it after the fact. And when did that come out? In 2000. And strange because the criticism for some films was that they kind of fall off. Same thing with music, it kind of falls off. Like I'm kind of sick of listening to a lot of Gen Xers when they say, there's no music. No, you're just not digging. Like the art of looking for stuff that interests you. It's like you were so used to things being ready-made, kind of given to you. But with films, it's different. Films, they show up in the theaters. And back in 2000, it was still marketed normal, right? Another film that bothered me, this is a little sidebar, it's not in the list, but it will eventually be in the list at some point in time. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What a weird, that should have easily made money. And most kids have seen it after the fact, because I've worked with kids. Or people have seen it after the fact that have liked the movie. Yet, it kind of, I know, got stalled for a little while, because I remember there being posters, and then all of a sudden it just came out. And I think it was like early spring, at the time of the early spring films didn't make as much money. And they were like, that's it, it's done. Despite the fact it gives a nod to the sequel. And the cast itself was amazing. Yassine Bey, and you have, what's that guy? Martin Freeman, and you have, what's her name? Deschanel. I know Zoe Deschanel. She was in the film too. It's, again, sidebar. Any which way. Wonder Boys came out in 2000. It has, again, it's one of those films you kind of have to visit. It's one of those 21st century gems. And that list in the other podcast, which I guarantee will be a lot more organized than this, will be one of those films that I will definitely clock on. Like that's, you want to look at 20th century films, this is a 21st century film. And even though it was made before, it was released in 2000. So give it the respect. Second film came out same year. This is one of those films that it's for some reason left the theater so quickly that the people out I know that were aware of it had to go to the Dollar Theater to see it. This is The Way of the Gun. This is Chris McQuarrie, the director. He directed films with Jack Reacher, did a lot of the Mission Impossible films from Rogue Nation on. There's a lot of work there. I think this is the writer-director situation with him. It's really interesting because this film has a lot of interesting characters and detail. It's basically about two hired guns kind of falling out and given a project. And the narration, the opening sequence alone, right? I already knew Sarah Silverman existed as a comedian, right? But just the opening sequence alone is just genius. Because she takes that type of female's attitude in those situations, right? And pushes it in such a ridiculous dialogue, and it gets the reaction needed. It kind of sets Ryan Phillippe, it's one of the very few roles that a lot of people kind of like, whoa, okay, this guy's going to now start doing stuff like this. And I guess that didn't happen, but this is that film. Benicio del Toro, James Caan, Nicky Katz. There's so many people in this film, right? And essentially, it's about a ransom situation. A baby and Juliette Lewis. I mean, she's in the film. There's a lot of weird shit going on in this film, but it's exceptionally good. It's one of those films that there's a lot of there's one narrative going on, baseline narrative. They hired these guys to do this job, but everybody's investment in their placement in this job, which is obtaining a baby from a surrogate, adds to the texture of the film. The way they execute, there's a sequence where the kidnapping takes place, right? And they're walking through the scenario of how, almost in a military way, of how to manage getting away, a cat and mouse thing, walking with cars, aiming, taking cover of each other. Like, it's done so beautifully well that's so memorable. And it's just chaos and incarnate. Like, this thing winds itself up in such a way that the ending proves the result. Like, you are very satisfied with the ending. James Caan just eats dialogue in this film because he's the bag man, basically retrieve the situation. One detail me, my cousin, and a few other people kind of geeked out about. So there's a scene where he's driving up to a pump, and Benicio del Toro's character looks outside of the vehicle, because certain vehicles under a certain year don't have the little arrow indicator, which is where the gas tank is on the console. You know that little gas tank, fuel tank thing image you have on your dashboard, and it usually has a little arrow going right or left. Right? Up to certain years, vehicles didn't have that. That wasn't a thing. You just kind of knew. Because understand, it could be right, left. It also could be in the back. Also, it could be up front. That's a thing. Right? But the fact he stopped just to kind of look at what side it was on was kind of dope. Like, stupid details like that geek me out. Because I know people have done that. And that's what makes it interesting. You know, there's a lot of film that exists. It's kind of just fodder, just there, just to entertain, just throw things in. But weirdly enough, when it comes to films, the writer kind of dictates and the director kind of dictates, and everybody putting into it, even the actors. Like, you understand, this is collaborative art. This is a situation where people are putting their details and then nuance into it. They're encoding it into this large tapestry you see in films. That's why, as a culture, it should never go away. And the fact that, you know, like I said in earlier episodes, they're kind of butchering it. So the second film, the one I would paste into the 21st century decent films, is Way of the Gun. Benicio del Toro, Ryan Phillippe, Juliette Lewis, Taye Diggs, Nicky Katz, James Caan. It's just really, really, really interesting film. There's a feel in this film that makes me think, like, okay, 90s. And sometimes I think films like these, Tarantino changed things, but he's not the end-all of end-all. I mean, I do like the man's filmography, don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily always agree with his perspective on things, but it is what it is. He exists. He's one of several different directors, right? The fact he's going to go on and do work, academic work, or other types of work when it comes to film just tells me, clearly, man loves film. My favorite film from Tarantino is Reservoir Dogs. Still, till today, hands down, favorite film. But there's a lot of directors from the 70s. So this film, even though they're like, Tarantino, that's they'll constantly say over and over and over again because they don't have any fucking reference points. No, this has a weird 70s feel to it in regards to the texturing and layering. There's a lot of films in the 70s that are more complicated than need be, right? Like Bring Me Ahead of Alfredo Garcia. That's just a crazy film, but there's a lot more going on. The Wild Bunch, right? Those are two Peckinpah films, right? And there's a lot of things in these films back in the day that help flush things out, right? It wasn't until like the 80s when they were like, we must have all peaks. We cannot not have any valleys. Our goal is to treat these films like dope, right? And that's what changed everything. I'm not saying all of it got changed, but a good percentage of films got changed, right? The artists from the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and even way back in the day, like new film noir, low budget films, like their goal was to try to do something different, push the boundaries a little farther, right? Add texture, add context, right? This film has that. I mean, it made some money. The budget itself, I have it right here. Yes, I told you I have notes. I wasn't lying. The budget itself was like $8.5 million. It made $13.1 million, which is not the profit they typically want. You got to put that in consideration. Blade Runner, right, ran into heavy production costs because of strikes at the time. That made its money back based on how much the film cost, but it didn't make a high enough percentage back for them to note it. Again, season 1, I went through the painstaking detail of some of this stuff through a long essay. And I took up several episodes in season 1. Go back to that. Check that out. So just what Marvel's doing to film, because I genuinely still have nods. I have an update on some of it coming up. I think it's going to be 1 or 2 episodes. Because I like it's still going. It's still active. So me to comment about it kind of makes sense. It's a follow-up piece, right? Because I think they did do something fucked up and kind of dropped the ball really heavy. Because I was already calling it before Endgame. Any which way. So films make money, but they always want a large amount of money, right? And I'm going to eventually make the commentary of like Heaven's Gates. I'm going to talk about that at some point in time, probably a little more detail. Because I genuinely think films like that and certain films and just arguments in the press about how much these auteurs or these directors were eating money and they needed to return. And it was kind of when they got into the whole blockbuster Jagged situation, like, Jagged, like, we need money up front. We're not looking at money in the long term. Again, films will make money in the long term. But here's what's weird. Why I think these lost films are why I think you should check them out is nobody's fucking paying me to tell you this. So you know that. I'm just straight out telling you the truth right now. I am not getting paid to promote any of this shit. I think this shit's dope. I think you should check it out. Right? And again, it's one of those lost films. Every person's checked it out after the fact. They've asked me, like, hey, you suggest a film? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Ex Machina, right? That makes sense to me. I seen that. I was blown away, right? That's really good tone, really good feel, really good ending. So The Way of the Gun, you should check it out. I'm not sure if you can get it. I'm not even sure if it's in circulation right now. Like, I'm not sure what is in print and what is out of print. We don't have those type of stores anymore, it seems to be. So go to the used shop. Go to the shop. Stop fucking getting from Amazon. Like, go to the shop, goddamn it. Right? Those people need localize everything. By going to the larger structure and having them mail it to you. Those people are taking your money and putting it where they want to put it. The local shop, like, you gotta tell me you don't have a used DVD shop. You don't have a used record store that sells new stuff as well as old stuff. It's somewhere, it's 30 minutes away. Drive. Okay. Get a car. Gen Z's like, car? What's that? But that's the thing. Do it. Right? Put your time into that. Walk around, actually. Peruse. Check other shit out, too, while you're at it. That's just me. Anyway, the last one is a film called Bad Times at the El Royale. Now, it's interesting because Joker 2, I've already explained to you, I liked. In an earlier episode, I must say episode 1 or 2, I liked Joker 2. I'm eventually going to explain why I like Joker 2 in the other podcast, but I'm telling you, if you want to see the precedents for Joker 2, watch Pink Floyd The Wall. The movie. Not the album spinning on your turntable. The actual movie. It kind of sets a cinematic precedence for the Joker 2. Right? And again, I still think you can have a sequel to that film. It doesn't require Joaquin Phoenix. And I think it would match really nicely into what James Gunn's doing with the DC Universe. So anyway, I seen Joker 2. And it got bombarded. Everybody's like sitting there going, this was released around this time. And, it's just not that good. These evil fucking superhero films need to go away. That's what's generally said. Look, see, it just underperformed. It was terrible. I can't believe this nonsense. No, there's a period of time, sometime in the late fall, that seemed to show up. I want to say might even show up as far back as The Departed. I think Fight Club came out in 99 in the late fall. And I don't think it did that well in the box office. I know obviously it had an echo effect, and it was the wrong echo effect, but it was the echo effect nonetheless. Because it's a good film. David Fincher, right? But I want to say there's a butcher effect when it comes to films in general in the late month of September and October. I think they geared up the market so much that you have to have like these quirky Halloween horror films. And every so often somebody will test this idea. I could be wrong about The Departed though. I know that came out around the same time. I watched it on my birthday, so way back in the day. So I know it came out. And when I seen the date for this, I'm like, okay, I want to go see that around that time. But Bad Time at the El Royale also got butchered for the same reason. This is another interesting film that takes place in an event. Now, I'm not sure how many of you out there have watched Cocaine Bear, and you're like, Cocaine Bear. I'm sorry, that film was done really well for what it is. And they created an event, and that's a central point. In this situation, is similar to that, right? You have a El Royale, you have a hotel, and you have people coming in and out for different reasons. And the cast, not necessarily star-studded, but up and coming, as well as star-studded, kind of set the tone of the film. They add their own individual character that spills into a larger mess, right? You have Jeff Bridges, Dakota Johnson, John Hamm, Louis Pillman, Chris Hemsworth, Cynthia Erivo, and Kaylee Spanini, right? I think I said the last name right. Hopefully I did. Now, obviously, Jeff Bridges, Chris Hemsworth, and John Hamm established, right? But Cynthia Erivo is awesome in this film, right? Louis Pullman is awesome. Like the weight. Dakota Johnson just came off of that whole That came off that whole 15 Shades of Asshole, the fucking weird ass fucking franchise that motherfucker just do Venus and Furs. Like, why would we do these shitty, fucking awful fucking films? Like, really? Even the actor that was in that with her, I can't remember the dude's name right now. He rebounded his whole career. Like, if you ever seen Belfast, I advise you to go see it. That dude does a great job in that film, right? But her and him in that tied up in that and just kind of based off all these weird fucking things, rather than doing this shit, giving it gravitas and kind of I'm not saying that type of film shouldn't exist. It should, but just the way it was done is just hackneyed. It was terrible. It's based off a terrible book. To my understanding, poorly written too. Now, granted, I'm not the end-all of end-all when it comes to writing, but that is a thing. She redeems her career in this situation, right? I know everybody's like, but you know, the whole Madam Web film. Yeah, well, you know, Sony really didn't know what they were doing. I'm not necessarily saying she was a bad choice, but it is what it is. This film is not that film, though. This is definitely a noir film. There's a lot of shit going on in this film. Again, large cast, well executed. I'm not sure if it's Goddard or Goddard, Drew Goddard. And I know he's linked to Daredevil. He ended up Cloverfield. What else do I have written? Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, he has all that stuff going on for him. This film was $32 million budget and barely made 32 back, roughly 30, 32. And it's interesting because a lot of people didn't know this was out. And everybody that's actually seen this has been, wow, that movie was crazy. I'm like, yeah, because it takes such a hard, interesting turn. Like, when things get out of control, right, the development of each character, when things get out of control, is essentially when a fucking cult arrives, right? And that changes the texture of everything. But then you have a Hail Mary. The hotel itself, right? Motel, individualized rooms under one umbrella, is interesting. And the fact that it has a weird history, a sordid history, right, helps to the feel of the film, right? And each individual character making their own play through it helps. So the feel of the set, the feel of the design, the feel of the place that they're all operating out of becomes a character unto itself. So when you're watching it, you're going, just the texture alone, the feeling alone, you know, it borders two different states, has a weird and interesting duality. There's a lot going on in this film. And the fact that it was kind of overlooked kind of drove me nuts. Again, the third film in this Lost film episode. So, in quicker review, Wonder Boys. It came out in 2000, starring Michael Douglas, Tobey Maguire, Robert Downey Jr., Katie Holmes, Frances McDermott. I think you need to check that out. That's number one. Number two, The Way of the Gun. It came out in 2000 also. Starring Taye Diggs, Nicky Katz, Ryan Phillippe, Benicio del Toro, James Caan, Juliette Lewis. There's a lot of people in that movie. Both weirdly complicated films. Right? And the last one, Bad Times at El Royale, 2018. It's neo-noir. It stars Jeff Bridges, Cynthia Erivo, Dakota Johnson, John Hamm, Kaylee Spanini, I think that's her name. I could be saying it wrong. Lewis Pullman, Chris Helmsworth. It is definitely something to check out. You will not be disappointed by this stuff. If you like really complicated action films, not just simply just shoot them the fuck up one-man army films, if you're still stuck on that, then there's no help for you. You know, but all you need is just one dude that does this one dude type stuff, and that's it. That's all. And then the same person says, why do all these superhero films exist? Yeah, they do exist. I've talked to people like this. It's a fucking amazing. It's like, instead of them trying to figure out, they really think the rabbit trick is genuinely a guy pulling a rabbit from the dimension. So anyway, which way? Treat films like pieces of art. Keep revisiting them. You find more interesting things. They're extension of literature. And that's as far as I'm going to go with this episode. Thank you. We will be back something probably a little more heavier in episode 9. Actually, I can kind of give you a heads up. Hold on. Yeah, no. It's going to be Daredevil Volume 2. Probably the most interesting runs of Daredevil ever. The comic book, yeah. Not the Ben Affleck movie. Not that thing. Not the series that's debuting in season 4 indirectly. Not that. But what that's all based on. So, I'm going to actually cover in pieces Daredevil Volume 2 and talk about it. Talk it up to you. Because I think it should be read. Because it gives you interesting feeling. Outside of that, there's a bunch of future shit coming up. But I will tell you this. So, Cinematic Grind is going to be a podcast that I'm going to do. And unlike this rough, breathing, steaming podcast I have going on right now, it's not going to be as free form and off the cuff. It's actually probably going to be structured. And one of the films in the first episode is going to be Wonder Boys. And I'm actually going to do probably a more detailed breakdown of that. I know I kind of went into it a little further than I need be. But my goal was to do that. It's not as much of a breakdown as much as it is analysis. Because it does go into the book of one of the better 21st century films. And I do advise you to check it out. Anyway, from this point on, I bid you a farewell.